I'm actually just going to focus on truth as in the real definition of truth, because it might have been my own naivety, but I was a little surprised that to be a truth, you didn't necessarily have to be true. I think that the actual definition, a fact or a belief that is accepted as true, really struck out to me. And I think one of the things that I immediately felt when I was preparing for this was there's a tension there, right? There's a really interesting tension between fact and a widely accepted belief. And I think what immediately popped out to me was that it's related to your distance to the problem, right? It's related to your distance to the experience. So by proxy of that, you can assume and maybe take a conclusion that the closer I am to something, the easier it is for me to understand that empirically that it's true, that it's grounded in fact. But what happens when you get further away from it, right? It implicitly falls into that other category, that other definition of truth. Because when we think of truth, we think, oh, it's something that's real, it's something that's fact. But the further and further you get away from it, it becomes a widely accepted belief. So when you think about that, I think it's a really interesting tension. And you don't even need post-truth to actually realize that truth doesn't have to be true. It's actually right there in the definition. And so I think what's kind of interesting about this is when you start to think about the role of media, when you think about the role of having a power of distribution, it's a lot easier to create truth, right? This isn't new. I mean, there's a lot more intelligent people that can talk a lot. About this, but I think it's really interesting when you start to think about the space that we're in. You start to think about health and wellness, and you start to think about our relation to health and wellness, right? It's an abstract thing. I love the idea that the FDA is going to redefine what healthy is, right? That they're just going to change if that's not based off something that's constant, that it's something that's constantly evolving, right? And I think when you think about it, we've seen it constantly, right? You've seen it over decades. You remember this? This was the Bible for what it meant to be healthy when you were young, right? And then, oh gosh, that's wrong. Or this, right? The idea that GMOs, this constantly evolving relationship around GMOs, right? That sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, it depends. It's this shifting basis. It's shifting in terms of widely accepted beliefs, right? And then obviously sugar, right? The topic du jour, right? Constantly trying to figure out, is sugar bad for you? Is it good for you? Obviously, is it an acceptable replacement for fat? And that whole conversation shifted, right, where they were trying to replace fat with sugar, and this conversation was being manipulated, and we found that literally the definition of truth around what was healthy was constantly shifting, right? That idea of that widely accepted belief kept on maneuvering. And then obviously the opiate epidemic, right? I love this. I love the idea that because of this constantly shifting, widely accepted belief, the very foundation of trust is starting to erode. And then this, right? In the 1930s, there started a very, very effective campaign to establish a new widely accepted belief, to establish a new truth that stood literally in direct opposition to millennia of experience. The relationship between man and cannabis is just rooted in our history. There's a symbiotic relationship with the plant, between man and plant. Man is responsible for its proliferation and growth across the world, across the globe, and it has literally played a critical role in our health throughout history. This is the Chinese symbol for cannabis. In one of the earliest texts that we have around plant-based medicine and wellness, they highlight cannabis as a miracle drug. In India, since the beginning of recorded history, cannabis has played a critical role in everything from their health to their rituals, and even today, it's a key part in their daily, annual rituals. And even before the 1930s, in the early 20th century, cannabis was widely distributed in the US. Widely distributed, often recommended by doctors, and was critical, safe tool for maintaining your health and wellness. And then something happened, right? You went back to this idea, so something stood directly contrary to fact. Truth began to shift away from that kind of direct experience back to this idea that we can create a new widely accepted belief. And that widely accepted belief was built not against cannabis, not against plant-based medicine, but was rooted in really, really nefarious, horrible things, right? This was primarily a campaign that was driven by race and prejudice and has shaped our entire relationship with a critical tool for our health. For those of you who don't know, there's this thing inside your body called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is the most prevalent network of receptors in your body. It is directly responsible for managing your body's homeostasis. Your body is naturally producing cannabinoids every day, every moment, just now. And it is really, really important to our health and happiness. And because of this shift, this wide shift in what became an accepted belief, which became truth, our relationship has completely changed around it. Now, it's changing, right? We're seeing things like this. We're seeing at least a broader acceptance that cannabis shouldn't be legal, or shouldn't be illegal, rather. We're seeing states stand up against the federal government for their citizens' rights. And of course, in the news, it's constantly talking about the economic opportunity around cannabis. It's significant. But what's missing in this narrative, right, is this idea, the real fact, right? Health does not often creep into this narrative. You get people like Sanjay Gupta that are doing a fantastic job to reorient ourselves, to reorient our relationship around cannabis, but all too often it's still grounded in that accepted belief, right? In that widely accepted belief that was so appropriately and so artfully established in the 30s. And I think that's the challenge, right? This is the heart of the space that we were really focused on. Was really, how can you create an innovation? What can you do in this space to completely recontextualize cannabis? How do we bring it back to a critical tool for our well-being? How do we make it a viable opportunity for people that have grown up in an area, in a time where it's been stigmatized, where it's been completely wrapped in a widely accepted belief, when it's completely been wrapped in a truth that is baseless? And I think that was the ecosystem that we were facing. And I think the other thing that we've kind of been challenged with is the modern perception of what it means to be healthy. And I think when we think about what it means to be healthy, so often we think about, well, I'm not sick, right? You think about, oh, I've gone to the doctor and I've taken a pill and I'm better, so I'm not sick, so thus I must be healthy. When really there's a shift happening right now. You see symptoms of it, but really the definition of what being healthy is, it's a daily commitment, right? It is something, it's everything that you put in your body either contributes, has a neutral effect, and most often has a negative effect on your health. And so this was the ecosystem when we started to think about Humboldt, and we started to think about what we could do to change the landscape and what we could do to provide people and our patients the solution. And we had a goal when we started. We said to ourselves, if we can get mainstream media to talk about Humboldt, and we can talk about cannabis and talk about plant-based medicine as a critical tool for their health, that's a win. That is the sign that we're doing our job, and that we are doing our job to shift that truth back to that direct experience, to bring truth back to being true versus just this adopted, widely accepted belief. And for us, it really started with dose, right? So the key focus, one of the key kind of symptoms of language around wellness and Western medicine is a repeatable and consistent experience, right? And for us, that really started with dose. And so this is the Humboldt dose pen. This was, it's a medical grade plastic device that is designed to deliver a precise 2.25 milligram dose of vapor. We use a combination of airflow control, time control, haptic feedback, and temperature ramp to ensure that you're getting the appropriate amount of medicine. After 3 seconds, it vibrates and shuts off to tell you that your dose is done. Very simple to use, no buttons, one inhale. The next part of dose around plant-based medicine is obviously plants are susceptible to their environment, they're responsive to the environment. So dependent on the environment, the compounds in your plants are going to change, right? It only makes sense. You hear about people using strains for sleep, and then they go back to that strain a few months later, and they have a totally different experience with it. Makes sense. So what we focused on was, could we isolate the compounds in cannabis, and then based off of the millennia of cultural experience in anthropology, based on thousands of papers and desk research, and we hired a kick-ass chief science officer that knew the plant really well, could we isolate the compounds and recombine them in a way that delivered a specific health benefit? So each one of our formulas are designed to deliver a specific health benefit. We launched in September of 2016 with 4 formulas. Bliss is a general mood elevator. Sleep obviously makes you sleep. Calm is an anti-anxiety. And relief is an anti-inflammation tool. Everything that we did in and around that pen was kind of designed to recontextualize cannabis. We're very, very careful to focus on pulling from the appropriate cues. If we continue to lean into the cues that exist around cannabis, we would continue to breathe life into that stigma. And so we chose, let's leave that behind. Let's focus instead on positioning this product and the product experience in the way that we want an ideal relationship with a health and wellness company. That started with simple things. Oh, there's music. Amazing. It started with simple things like this, instructions. And I don't know if anybody's been into a dispensary or they purchased a cannabis product. This is a novel thing, right? It also started with the idea of, like, let's actually include recommended doses. Let's talk about what that experience is. It also meant providing the appropriate support. You can go to our website and there is a live person there. For the first few months it was me. That will respond and be there and help you through your experience, right? A novel thing. When I think about it now and I think about any medicine that I'm taking, why isn't this happening, right? Why aren't the people that are there to care for your health, that are providing tools for your health, why aren't they there to support you? The idea, too, was as you move further and further away from the product experience, how do we make sure that the widely accepted belief, the truth that we were trying to create, actually supported the product and that they were synergistic? And that meant using different visual cues, showing cannabis, showing the product in a health and wellness lifestyle, and leading into that space and talking about it differently.
Help you live a healthy and happy life. Our plant-based formulas work with your endocannabinoid system to support the overall well-being of people looking to relieve pain, reduce stress, sleep better, and feel good, all with your health and happiness in mind.
8 weeks after we launched, we were named by Time magazine as one of the best inventions of 2016. It was particularly exciting for us because of the headline they used. Cannabis that could replace pills. And I think for us, that was the validation that we knew that we were on the right track. When you can get a publication like Time magazine to talk about cannabis as a tool for health, and furthermore, they could talk about it in contrast to the toxic medicines that people are putting in their body every single day. And more importantly, what we've been hearing from our patients. Every day we hear great stories about people that are coming to cannabis for the first time because of a consistent, repeatable, and reliable experience, because of the innovative approach to creating a direct experience around the product, and the world that we've wrapped around it has made it inviting and welcoming. We hear people that are sleeping better. And then this, which is one of my favorite quotes, which is someone that had a surgery that snipped a nerve in her body and has been taking two fentanyl patches. And apparently these things, I've never heard, an actic sucker, which is the highest dosed opiate that you can get outside of a hospital. She was taking 4 a day and had it dramatically cut, was now using half of one and using cannabis as a substitute. My own parents are now off of opiates for back pain because they're using the Humboldt dose pen, and it is amazing to see people coming back to the medicine every single day. And I think when we think about innovation, it has always been really trying to create that tension and live back to that tension between that duality in the definition of truth, right? This idea that the empirical experience, that fact, has to connect back to the brand promise. It has to connect back to that widely accepted belief. And that's been, I think, my biggest lesson of coming into the space, my first time as a marketer and a startup, has been really focused on being product-centric, focus on that direct experience before you wrap the brand around it, have it come from that. And I think that's been our biggest learning so far. So that's it. Thanks.